A lot of people ask me, what value does Bitcoin have? Or how do I value Bitcoin? This is a question that for a long time I struggled to answer because there aren't really any robust systems or formulas for measuring Bitcoin. But recently I've been experimenting. I was trained philosophically at university, and so one method that philosophers use to reach conclusions or to suggest different axioms that they'd like to affirm is something called a thought experiment. So I created this thought experiment that I've been running with a couple of different friends and family members, and so I wanted to talk about it here today. And I'm going to keep this video really short because I want to be able to send people to this video as a reference whenever I get this question in the future. If you're someone who's having a hard time valuing Bitcoin, this is really understandable. And I think that you have to start with a series of questions. And if you're someone who maybe has family members who think you're crazy for talking about Bitcoin now, this is just a really easy way to get people to have like this kind of aha moment. And I'm going to break down sort of the questions. There's 3 questions that you ask, and then, sort of the conversations you'll have around those questions, right? So the first question you ask someone is there something you possess that cannot be taken away from you? And you might get a couple of answers to this. It's not necessarily a really easy question. I think the best answer to this question, I'll start there, is knowledge. Knowledge is something that you possess that is not easily taken away from you. I think some other answers I've heard are people like to say, oh, my name, or my identity. If people try to say things like my house or my car or the money in my bank account, these are all things that can be easily taken away. The government could come in, take your house, seize your property. They do this all the time. Eminent domain, they can, seize your car. They can freeze your bank accounts, right? So those are really bad answers. Personality, I mean, like maybe possibly. I think sort of my refutation to this would be, well, I imagine if you had, experienced war or maybe were in a Nazi concentration camp or something really traumatic, maybe your personality could actually be taken from you. It's debatable, but I think the best answer, and one that I try to lead people to, is knowledge, right? Knowledge can't be taken away from you. And I think that what's really important and characteristic about knowledge is that knowledge is intangible. And I want to just highlight that right now because it's something we're going to return to. So the next question that you ask people is there something that has tangible value that cannot be taken away from you? Is there something you possess that has tangible value that can't be taken away from you? And people will really struggle with this one. They won't try to name things like a house or a car because they realize those can easily be taken away from them. So they struggle to answer this one. And really there is no answer unless you understand Bitcoin. The answer is Bitcoin. But it's important that you frame the question in this way, because what you're doing with this question and asking, is there a asset that has value to you that cannot be taken away, is you're really starting to get them to think in the physical realm and think about things that actually have value. What has value? Well, money has value. People like to store their value in art. People like to store their value in real estate. And they start thinking in this way, and they start to quickly realize, well, man, these are all things that, 1, people might not have a lot of, or 2, can easily be taken away. And so the follow-up question to that is, if you could have something that had tangible value, right? Like, what's important here in asking this question is that knowledge is really hard to quantify. It's hard to quantify the value of knowledge. And so if you could possess something that has tangible value that could not be taken away from you, how much would you value that thing? And people will get stumped here. I think some people have said to me things like, well, what is the thing? And that response is understandable, because when people think about value, they immediately, they've been conditioned to believe that there has to be something material, right? And this gets back to the first question that we asked, which is, what is there that exists that can't be taken away from you? And the answer is knowledge, right? And I said that knowledge is intangible, right? This is very important because Bitcoin is intangible because it exists in the form of a distributed database. And when you get people to this third question, they're likely to not have an answer, or I think the correct answer, and this answer is something that some people will get. They'll say that's like you can't value it. It's unvaluable. It's unvaluable. And I think this is correct, because something of this nature really does have infinite value. And I just like to do this thought experiment with people, and then I follow up by saying, look, Bitcoin is an asset that has value, that has tangible value, and it is something that cannot be taken away from you. It is unseizable. It is unconfiscatable. And there really becomes this kind of aha moment, because then I get them to start seeing that as more and more people understand this, and there are a very limited number of people who do understand this fully, Bitcoin has the potential to be infinitely valuable, meaning its value could, in theory, continue on into infinitum. And that's not the point of this video. The point is to get people to start thinking. And so my dad, he responded and he said, well, that's not true. Bitcoin can be taken away. And this is a very understandable response from anyone, right? Because nothing like this has really existed that can't be taken away from you. And so people just, this really demonstrates an ignorance. It demonstrates that someone doesn't really understand how Bitcoin works. And so my typical response to people is it's best not to make comments about something that you really don't know. Because if you really understand how Bitcoin works, it's factual. It can't be taken away from you, because your private key can be held in the form of a mnemonic. I don't really know how to say that word, but a 12-word phrase that can be stored inside your brain and is essentially just knowledge. 12 words or 24 words. And as long as you can remember those 12 to 24 words, your Bitcoin can go with you wherever you go. And I often follow up by saying, imagine if the Jews could have fled Israel, or fled Nazi Germany, and actually been able to store their value in their brain. Imagine Venezuelans who are undergoing hyperinflation right now, being able to leave their country, sell their assets and take that value along with them, in a different, in digital form, in a non-tangible form, or Syrian refugees who have been fleeing to different parts of the world. This technology has tremendous power, and it really is something that's hard to concretely value. But I think that this thought experiment is just a great way to start to introduce this understanding to people and get people sort of thinking more about, well, why does Bitcoin have value? Because all value is subjective. If I could sell you a glass of water right now, you might pay $1 for it, versus if you had just come out of the Sahara desert for 100 days, I could probably sell you that same bottle of water for $100. All value is subjective, and the fact that Bitcoin has any value at all demonstrates that there are people who know enough about Bitcoin and are willing to put their fiat money into this digital form of money. And that digital form of money must be providing some service to them. And I think the number one service is that this is a form of value transfer and money and wealth storage that is unseizable. And that is one of the key value propositions. This video has gone a lot longer than I was expecting. But if you guys would like to learn more, you can follow me on Twitter at @elima_III. I post there regularly. I'm also on Instagram at @elima_III. And yeah, see you guys in the next video. Peace.